Chapter 4, Work and Education. The first colonists had put all their energy into simply surviving, but now they had more secure food and shelter. Colonists took up other jobs. Some jobs were needed in every colony. A miller was necessary to make flour for bread. Blacksmiths smelted iron to create farming tools and weapons. Artisans made furniture, containers, fences, and silverware. Women also had important jobs, including raising children and overseeing their education. Women also grew, gathered, and preserved most of the food. They spun, wove, and sewed clothing. So there were different lands and different jobs in the colonies. We had the 13 colonies. Other jobs varied by colony. Shipbuilding and whaling were important in the New England colonies. Carpenters built ships. Sailmakers, rope makers, and blacksmiths outfitted them. Sailors made up their crew. Whaling provided ivory, blubber, and oil for light. Many indentured servants and slaves worked in the whaling industry. So the ivory, blubber, and oil was used to, like in their lamps for the light and stuff. And I thought it was really interesting to read about the indentured servants and slaves that they worked in the whaling industry, because I always thought of them as being on the plantations and stuff. So it's kind of interesting that they helped out in that area as well. So in the middle colonies, corn and wheat grew well. Rivers provided power for mills to grind grain, and the land was rich with iron, creating jobs for miners. One thing, the rivers providing power for mills to grind grain. Sorry, if you've ever been to Warrego Mill, it's like past Springdale. There's a place called Warrego Mill, and they have the Warrego River, and they built a mill there. And so if you ever wanted to go on a quick little vacation or a sightseeing tour, you could have your parents take you to the Warrego Mill. It's a pretty neat place. All right, farming continued to be an important occupation throughout the colonies, but instead of growing food only to feed their families, farmers grew crops to sell to other colonies and countries. The southern colonies were known for their plantations. Plantations were large farms that used slave labor to produce crops to sell. Tobacco was a crop that made some colonists especially rich. The wealthiest colonists owned plantations spanning thousands of acres. Warehouses, slave quarters, and chapels were built alongside the mansions. As in the middle colonies, settlers in the South often forced Native Americans off the land to build their plantations. So education in the colonies. All children who were not slaves received some form of instruction. The style of education differed by region and background. Many colonists, such as the Puritans, thought it was important to be able to read the Bible. The New England Primer was published in 1690 in Massachusetts and was used to teach reading to some children. Some women taught local children while tending to their chores in their homes. These schools were called dame schools. At age 8, boys could continue on to grammar school to learn writing, reading, and arithmetic. Girls might learn writing in the home, but usually learned only household duties. The education in the middle colonies was mostly left to families until the 1680s, when a Pennsylvania law required that all children be taught to read and write. Pennsylvania's first school soon opened. In the southern colonies, education primarily took place at home. Plantations were large, and most children did not live as close together as in other colonies, so wealthy families would hire tutors. As boys grew older, they might be sent to England to finish their schooling. Girls learned reading, writing, and basic arithmetic skills so that they could run the home. If you look at this boy here, you might wonder what that is. It's called a dunce hat. So like when they got in trouble, they would make them wear a hat or do something to be really embarrassing, like stand on the stool so everybody could see them and laugh at them. That was kind of their way of trying to make people behave. Just like in the colonies, they would put people in these what they called like the stocks, where like their arms and their head would be hanging out through two boards, and people would go by and see them and they would be shamed for what they were doing. So it's kind of a similar thing here that they did in the schools. All right, so taking up a trade. After boys received a basic education, most got a job or possibly had an apprenticeship. This meant they learned a skill or trade from someone with experience. Boys often learned their father's craft. While it was not common for girls to have an apprenticeship, some trained to be dressmakers. More often, girls practiced skills such as sewing and knitting that would be useful in running a household and raising children. The New England Primer was the most popular textbook in colonial America. The primer taught children to read and about various topics. Each letter and phrase accompanied a matching picture. So, letter A, in Adam's fall we sinned all. Letter B, thy life to mend, this book attend. For letter C, they would read, the cat doth play and after slay. For letter D, a dog will bite, a thief at night. And for letter E, an eagle's flight is out of sight. So they would use those sentences to practice their letters and learn how to read. So consider your audience. We're going to review this passage closely. How does this school book compare with yours? You're going to write some phrases of your own that modern students could use to study letters.